Recording in progress.
So,
Okay. My name is Kennedy Gonzalez. Today is Thursday, April 13th, 2023. The time is 3:06. We're at the Pewaukee VFW, and I'm interviewing Walter Edinger, who was born June 18th, 1929, in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and served in the Korean War between the years of 1951 and 1953. Walter Edinger was sergeant in the Marines and worked as a forward observer. This interview is sponsored by the Bell Tower Memorial. Okay, so prior to going into the military, what were you doing?
well, I was going to college at Penn State University, and this was about the my second year at college. I was asked to be drafted into the military, and I went to them and asked them if I could be deferred for until I got out of college. And so they did that. They let me decide later what I wanted to do. So I did that. I stayed in college, and in 1951, I got out of college. I'm trying to trying to think back as to when I was. I got out of high school in 47. I went into college in 47 in the fall. And so I was there in college when I was drafted. And I asked for a deferment. They did that. They gave me a deferment. And when I graduated from Penn State in forestry in 1950, let's see, it would be 1953, 4, something in that area, I got out. And then I went in, and they let me stay at home until the fall of 52. Well, fall of 52. And then I went that's when I was drafted into the Marine Corps. And I chose Marine Corps over the Army. One of the reasons was I had some ROTC training in Penn State in the Army, and I wasn't too crazy about the ROTC. And so therefore, when I had the chance to get a deferment, I and go with the Marine Corps, I did that. When I went into the Marine Corps in September of 51, and they sent me down to boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina. That was my first duty station, and I was down there for what I think about 10, 12 weeks. And then I got out of the boot camp, but then I went home for some leave, and they assigned me to another duty station in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. And the reason they did that is because they wanted to send me to an Army mapping school. And so I went to Fort Belvoir and to train as a geographic interpreter. And I was in the Marine Corps as in geographic information systems. So my first duty station, I said, was Fort Belvoir, but the next duty station was out in Fort Pendleton, California. And every Marine goes through advanced infantry training. Everyone, no matter what uh, you're going to be doing in the next couple of years, you always went to either boot camp at Pendleton or at Parris Island. Not Parris Island, but Lejeune. No, not Lejeune. It was another town in North Carolina.
Yeah. And so those early weeks of this basic training, how was that?
Well, it was very rigorous. I mean, let's face it. You went through boot camp and you had 40, 45, 50-pound packs. And then when we went to, and then that was further pushed and done when we went out to California and climbed those hills out there. And in between, I went to, as I say, I went to Fort Belvoir. And this was about in the fall of spring of 1950. See again, 52 is when I got out, and when I got out to California, I went through about another 8 weeks of advanced infantry training at at in Pendleton, California, after my stay at Fort Belvoir in geographic information systems and mapping. So I got out there, hitchhiking out there to California, went into service there at Pendleton, and that's when I went. From there, got on a troop ship down near San Diego, and went over to. I was on my way to Korea. At least I thought I was. When we got to Japan, got about a 2 days day of leave, and one of the people in charge of our group of people that were in the military, in the Marine Corps, and doing mapping. This guy got us together on the ship, and he said, "You guys are going to go to Afghanistan instead of Korea. And we're going to go there." And but before we got over to Korea, they changed their minds, and we didn't go there. We went to Korea. So I was in Korea in the fall of, went over there, got over there about, I don't know when it was, in the fall of 52. And they right away, I got off at Incheon, the place. Incheon's a pretty famous place because that's where the Chinese were almost wiped out when the Americans came around and cut them off down in Pusan when they were in fighting the Korean War. The Chinese, along with the North Koreans, and I got over there, went up, got out of Incheon, and then went from Incheon up to Kimpo Peninsula, and there I was with the First Marine Division there, and their headquarters was just north of Seoul, and I went to the Seoul headquarters, and when I got there, and they sent me. I was only there for a day, and they sent me back to Kimpo, and I was on Kimpo for a while, but it was a funny set of circumstances because Kimpo Provisional Regiment was a Marine, First Marine outfit with a headquarters, regimental headquarters down below the airport, near the airport in Kimpo. But we had a Marine artillery, and we had our own company of communications people, but we also had 3 battalions of South Korean Marines on the front line along the Kimpo Peninsula. The Han River was between us and the enemy, which was North Korea and Chinese. And that's where I spent almost a whole year there. And what I did was I not only made maps for the colonel. He wanted a big map of the regimental headquarters so he could play soldier. And it was funny, but I had these three Korean interpreters that worked for me because I was in the intelligence group there, and So I spent a lot of time making a big oh, it's bigger than this table. You double that up, and you have the whole regimental front. And the only thing I had available was cardboard boxes, corrugated uh, boxes, and that's the only thing I could use, plus plaster of Paris. And so I had we laid out the map on the table, and we would put pieces of cardboard that represented uh, the elevation of each of the on the map, and there were big pieces of cardboard. And the point is, making those maps was fine, except that they distorted the map. It was much more taller than it should have been, and we did that, and I had these crane interpreters that made them cut the thing out by contour, and then we put plaster Paris over it, made a map, and that was very helpful to them.
Yeah.
They loved
And
that.
going back to your initial like starting weeks, how was adapting to the military life?
Well, how was what?
Like when you first
Well,
joined, like how was adapting to the military lifestyle?
I didn't have a problem with it. Being a forester, I was rough. I used to run around the hills, and I was all ready to go to the Forest Service, and I didn't worry about climbing mountains or doing anything like that. It was not bad.
Hmm.
I didn't mind the discipline that they required at all. Is that what you kind of wanted
Yes. Yeah.
wanted me to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. In fact, I enjoyed the rough and tumble because that's what I did as a forester. I mean, I did that all the time.
Hmm. And so you said you were in Seoul, Korea, like
I
right
was in
on.
Seoul for a while, but then they sent me up to Kimpo. And when I was on Kimpo Peninsula, that's a peninsula that goes up. It goes all the way up to uh, to the Han River, and then the Han River flows due west and hits the Yellow Sea, and that's where I was stationed. And I would go up there most every day as a forward observer, and look over the other side to see what was happening over there, because on the other side they had this big mountainside like this, a big face, and they had tunnels in the top of it, and they would have cannon that they would use to fire at the 3 battalions of South Korean Marines that were along the front. But they never fired much, and we didn't never worried about an invasion because of the very 25-foot tides would come in twice a day in that area. So we didn't worry about them crossing over, nor did we ever plan to do the same. And so I'd go up there and pick out targets, and I would send them down to our military the artillery company that we had, and they would fire H&I fire almost every night. And I remember one of the things that I always remember was there was one particular spot that was really hot spot, and we needed more than just our firepower. So we called on the aircraft carrier that was over in the LOC, and it happened to be a Navy aircraft carrier, and we said, "Hey, fire on these guys," and it was Ted Williams. Ted Williams was was doing duty as a second. This was his second tour of duty. He was from the First World War, but when he got out, he was in the reserves, and he was sent back, and he was up when he was on that aircraft carrier. He flew a mission for us, and I always remember that. I don't know how successful we were. I didn't know how successful we were in all the stuff that we did, but we used to send in the targets, and that was kind of cool. Um, I never got shot at. I had a my roommate, college, was a gung ho guy, and he got to be a colonel in the army. But anyway, he was a captain, and when he went over to Korea, and he was in the 25th Division on the east of us. The Marine Corps was on the west side of the peninsula, and all the way across we had UN companies. You know, we had Australians, we had English troops there, and spread all the way across Korea. And anyway, Birch was in the 25th Division, and he came over to visit me, and he said, "You crazy, being up here on top of this mountain without cover." And I said, "Go up there," and never got shot at. But Birch thought maybe I should be more careful.
A little more cautious. Okay. Being in Korea, what were some of the things you and some of your colleagues did for fun?
What did we do for fun?
Yeah, to pass the time.
Well, I didn't do much of all, but just stay there, read books in the tent that night. But I would, for that whole year in Korea, why, I spent most of my time doing work. That's what you mean?
Yeah, you're very focused on work.
Anyway, let's see what else do I want to say about.
Could you tell me about the North Korean spy you guys caught?
Oh, we caught a spy. When we were in Korea, one of the one is our unit. Not wasn't it wasn't my headquarters unit that did it, but it was one of the Korean officers, and when some of his men caught this Korean, he was a North Korean spy, and I was assigned to take him over across the. There was a big channel that went from the Han River down to the southern part of Korea, and on that island was occupied by U.S. Army people, not Marines, but U.S. Army people, and they're the ones that wanted them. So we took them over there. I never knew what happened to the prisoner. Never knew what. Well, anyway.
What do you believe is the most important thing you did while you were in Korea?
The most important thing?
Yes.
Fire at the enemy. Well, we had I spent a whole year there, and the only thing I did was send in artillery H&I fire missions every day. Mm-hmm. So that was the main thing that I did, and I thought I did enough for the war effort there to keep the Koreans off guard, and the Chinese. I don't even know. I can't remember whether we had the Chinese across the river from us or the North Koreans. I think it was North Koreans, but the Chinese were involved heavily. They were beaten. They went back and forth twice on the peninsula, and they took a big beating. One of my friend there asked me about whether I was on in that Pusan area in the Chosun Reservoir, whether I was, because there's a lot of talk about the Chosun Reservoir, how the Chinese actually counterattacked our troops when they were on the Chosun Reservoir, but I never got there. I never made it there. But anyway, that was one of the things that I'm glad I didn't get to be a part of. Mm-hmm. That was a tough battle.
Yeah,
A lot of soldiers in the U.S. Army were killed there and were prisoners there.
Mm-hmm. And then after your time in Korea, how was the transition back to civilian life?
Well, it was very, very easy. I went back, and I had my degree in forestry, and I immediately applied to the Forest Service. I worked for the Forest Service in the summertime before I went in the military. So I knew that I wanted to be in the Forest Service. So I ended up going over to and living in Idaho for uh, 15 years of my career. 15, 15 years of my entire career I spent in Korea, and I was doing work there, uh, managing national forests. I was up on the very top of the North Idaho, and I was stationed at least 5 different places in Idaho before transferring back to Washington D.C. And the reason I did that is my wife said our kids aren't getting a good education. They need a better education. The teachers in Idaho were not that skilled. Just a lot of them were. A lot of the teachers didn't have degrees. They they uh, they had maybe had 2 or 3 years of training at some places, but they didn't have college degrees, and my wife didn't like that, so she talked me into sending the kids. We went back. We moved back to D.C. and after 50, being out west for 15 years,
Hmm.
and we went back there.
And so, were there many similarities between your job that you had in the military and then your job
Well,
once you'd come back?
well, no, you mean did I have a different? No, there were a lot of different reasons that it was different, but would manage national forests. That is, we had we had many national forests in the Forest Service. There's 125 national forests in the national forest in the system, and region region one had about 15 or 20 national forests, and I was on one of those, and they were all different,
Hmm.
but but I would go out and put up timber sales and manage the timber. That was one of the big things when I was out in the Forest Service. Um, I had lots of opportunities.
And when the Korean War ended, do you remember where you were, what you were
I was in
doing?
the Korean War ended the day I sailed underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a kind of neat coincidence. I got on a ship, same troop ship, and headed back in July of 1953. And we drove underneath, we floated underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and the next day the war was declared. They had a truce in with the Koreans, and that was kind of a interesting thing to all of a sudden find yourself going underneath the Golden Gate Bridge on the troop ship, and then finding out that the next day the war was over.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
Yeah. Are you in contact with any of the people that you served with? Are you still
No,
friends?
I was for a while, but I lost contact with them. Yeah.
And going, I lost what I thought. Going back to your time in Korea, you mentioned the river that separated you.
The
How
Han,
did the geography of Korea affect the way
very
you cared
mountainous.
for your dog?
Korea was very mountainous in the central part, and that was one of the things that was peculiar about it. But uh, most of the land in South Korea was actually more uh, less mountainous than North Korea.
Hmm.
But right there on the 38th parallel, it was pretty mountainous, and all the troops in the that were fighting for us in the in the in the Korea were fighting in mountainous country in the center of the state, center of the country. But when you went further south, it was pretty level and not mountainous at all.
Hmm. And while you were in Korea, how did you keep in contact with friends and family?
By 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 letters, mostly writing letters. We didn't have, I didn't do much phoning. Once in a while, I went on Japan for R&R, rest and reserve. They call it R&R, to Japan for about a week and a half. And when I was over there, I called the United States, but normally I didn't contact with anybody other than through the mail. Now, that was my big thing.
And what is a life lesson you've learned from your time serving?
Just that you have to know your job, really know your job, and make sure that if you're in charge of any units, that they get the treatment that they deserve. Because I was in charge of a number of people as I was as a sergeant in the Marines. Uh, so it was just a sense of making sure that I did the right things for the people that work for me, and that was one of the big things.
Hmm. And you chose the Marines, right? So
I chose the Marines over the Army.
why did you choose
Why did I?
Marines
Because I didn't think
specifically?
I didn't like the Army ROTC program. That was one of the reasons I didn't go in. And so when I had the chance to volunteer for the Marines, I did. That's a big reason. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add or mention from your
Well,
experience?
uh, well, I didn't mention my career in the Forest Service, but that was one of the greatest things that I ever did, and being in charge of and doing all the mountain climbing that I did in Korea sure helped a lot when I was back in the States and working in the Forest Service.
Mm-hmm.
But Forest Service was a great place to learn your skills and learn forestry, and that's what I did. I was lucky to get that um, deferment from Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm lucky to get in the Forest Service because I went out west right away to Idaho not long after I came back.
And why did you want to go into forestry?
Why did I want to forest? I like to be outside, walking around, uh, doing hunting, fishing,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So I really like that, and that's what got me into the Forest Service.
Yeah. In Pennsylvania, did you grow up very
I grew
out
up
in
there.
nature?
In fact, I worked for the state forestry for a year or two before I went out west. So I had, and not only that, but when I came back, I was consulting forestry too. That is, put up timber sales for clients. Put up timber sales and sold the timber, and they in turn to a logging company. But that's yeah.
Okay. And your job as a forward observer, um, did you
I was lucky.
did you ever did you the importance of your job? Did you ever see the effects of that?
No, I never did. I never did see the effects of the. We would fire every night. We had targets that we gave the artillery, and they call that H&I fire, a harassing and interdictory fire. And I would they, they would fire every night. They would fire 15 up to 100 rounds at across the river at the enemy, and they never fought back. They never fired back. All the time I was there, in the whole year, never fired a shot. So I was lucky there. But I don't know how how destructive we might have been with them, because we never did get to find out. The forward observer, I mean, I was a forward observer, but I couldn't tell
Mhm.
from across the river how far, how much damage we were doing. Han River was pretty wide, it's half a mile wide, and of course with the tides going through there twice a day at 25 feet in one time, that made a big difference in what you did going across the river. There were never any boats there. We never ever thought of doing that. If we were gonna go back north again, we would go through Sewell up that way, up around there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
After your time in Korea, did you, like, after years, did you ever go back to Korea?
No, I never did.
Like, just to visit, like now?
No, I never did go back. Yeah, never did go back. Um, I'm trying to think of what I never did. I never did go anywhere in the South, in that area of Japan or Korea or China. Never did any of that stuff when I got finished
Mm-hmm.
with my 1 year, because I was there 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, in closing this interview of Walter Edinger regarding his service in the Korean War, my name is Kennedy Gonzalez. The time is 3:38. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, and thank you for your
Thank you.
service.